How did you and Bob Dean actually meet? What were the first words that you guys said, or where did you run into each other for the very first time?
I was in the street in front of his house or mine. He said, I understand you're Air Force. I said, yeah. He said, I'm Army. And he said he was retired, and I was retired, so we got to visiting each other.
When I retired from the military in 1976, I bought a house in Tucson. I retired from the Presidio of San Francisco, where I had been a command sergeant major there at the 6th Army headquarters. Bought a house in Tucson, moved to Tucson, so help me. The house I moved into was directly across the street from Wendell Stevens. Talk about coincidence. So, our friendship blossomed more.
At that time I was working for the sheriff's department. He was the deputy sheriff, and he was bringing a staff car home at night, parking it in his garage. But he fascinated me because he had been to Japan and he got interested in the Japanese swords. He had a nice collection of swords on the wall in his house. Got by, we used to just get together and drink beer in either his yard or mine and talk.
So whenever we were together, when we were in the same town, we would share information. As I said, we were both part of APRO for many years, until Coral and Jim died, and we had to put APRO to bed. We both had learned the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, and I think that's kept us good, close friends for years. And I've known him and considered him a good and dear friend for many years. We have a lot in common, particularly this interest in the phenomenon, as people like to refer to it, so-called alien presence. I hate the word UFO. I just don't like to use it because it's so silly. It doesn't really say anything. We're talking about a presence of extraterrestrial intelligence on planet Earth. And Wendell and I share that view. His mail, as you probably have heard him say, was monitored very closely. Mine was too, by a matter of fact. His telephone line was bugged. My telephone was bugged. Just being members of APRO, I think, being on the board, we attracted attention from whoever shall remain nameless, but somebody bugged our phones, monitored our mail, and let me tell you something. They attempted to threaten me a number of times over the years, particularly when I came out of the closet, so to speak, and again speaking publicly and openly about what I had seen and what I had learned. There were attempts to intimidate me and threaten me. And I threatened right back. Wendell was an officer and a gentleman. I had been a commissioned officer for some years before. When I was in Korea, I was an infantry officer. But after the RIF 1956 reduction in force, I reverted back to enlisted grade and worked my way up to command sergeant major, and I was a grunt. I was an infantry officer. I was a field soldier. And I carried a gun, and still do. I don't have one on me at the moment, but, I carry guns. And when I was threatened, I threatened right back. And I think my first marriage went on the rocks because of my involvement with the UFO field. My first wife, my son's mother, was scared to death of the whole subject. Because I said we had our phone bugged and our mail was disturbed, and we were followed in traffic many times. They had a repertoire of little processes where they intimidated you. The phone calls probably were the worst. As I said, my first wife, I think our marriage went on the rocks because of the UFO field. But I was not easily intimidated. Having been an infantry soldier and being a grunt, both in Korea and Vietnam, I was not the kind to take kindly to someone trying to threaten me. And I put it out publicly. If you mess with me, bear in mind that I'm packing, I carry a gun, and I'll defend myself.
And the government is not going to open the files. We have people, prominent people, that know all about what the government is sitting on. Dick Cheney, vice president, was photographed at level 2 of S4 looking at one of 7 crash disks. Good morning. It's nice nice to see so many here this early in the day. This I was asked to talk about this event that happened 10 years ago that I've been sitting on all this time because I never knew whether it was a disinformation ploy to discredit me or not. When I was going to mention this in Australia, and I only agreed to mention it over in a telephone conversation, before I left for Australia, I received my last serious threat. And before I came here, after Bob distributed the schedule with the information on it that I'd talk about this case, I received another threat. And it came in the form of a male voice on my telephone. It rang. And the voice simply said, "Stevens, be absolutely certain you know what you're doing." And it clicked and hung up. So if they're going to really do something, they don't warn you in advance. So I usually don't take those things too seriously, although I know that they know what I was going to say. And they really don't want me to tell you what I'm going to tell you. So I've decided to publish this for the first time, the whole story, and you can decide for yourself. If I am successfully discredited over it later, then they won. If it stands, continues to stand, then I win. So it began 10 years ago. I got a call one time from, I get a lot of calls, and this man said that he'd like to come over and look at pictures. I usually discourage that. And he said that he had some pictures for me. I said, "Oh, to trade we can exchange?" He said, "Yes, we can exchange." And I said, "Well, okay, come on over then." And he said, "I'll see you," and he hung up. And about an hour later, I got another call from him. He said that he had checked out of his apartment, gone to the bank to get some money, and when he put his card in the teller machine, it came up account sealed or account frozen or something like that. And he said he said, "I got money in the bank." He said, "So I just went to another machine and used another card. That one was frozen." He went to the bank to draw it out over the counter, and they told him that his account was frozen. He couldn't get any money out. So he called me back. He said, I fear something serious." He said, "I can't get any money anyplace. All of my accounts are frozen. I have $300,000 in the bank." I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" He said, "I want to come over and show you and trade some pictures with you." I said, "Okay. How much is your bus fare?" He was calling me from the bus station. He said, "It's about $100, but I can't get any money to cover it." I said, "Okay, is there a convenience store around there? I'll wire you enough money for the bus fare. By Western Union, you can go over there, give my name as control, and draw the money out," which we did. Money transfer, where I sent money for him to buy the bus ticket to come over and see me. He said he had something for me. This is a follow-up. When he said he didn't get it, I went back to Western Union, had him make me a copy. And he got the money, and then he called me and he said, I'm a little worried. He said, I see the same man wherever I'm going, reading a newspaper. And he said, "This is suspicious." So he said, "But I'll see you," and he told me when the bus would arrive. When he got there and I picked him up at the station, he said, "I didn't bring the pictures." He said, I got a little worried about possibly being followed. And after he got the ticket, he thought he saw the same person standing behind the newspaper watching him, and later reading a magazine at the newsstand, always within sight of him, and he got a little paranoid about that, and the fact that he had the pictures in his pocket, and he thought he ought to safeguard it something. So he went out behind the bus station, got a hard box, a car starter box, a good sturdy box, put the package in the box and put rocks in it. They took it in and had the station wrap it and address it to ship it on the bus. And he said when they got it wrapped and I tried to pay for the shipment, they collected for the shipment. They said it couldn't go on the same bus. There wasn't enough time. It would come on a following bus. So he said I had to get on it and come on. He said, but it'll be in behind us.
So to separate himself from the photos is not a very bright move. It doesn't
Well,
make a
he
lot
thought
of
he
sense.
could get them on the same bus with him, and he took the box and had the bus station wrap it and address it to me at Tucson for delivery. And he wanted to get it on the same bus with him, and they said they couldn't put it on the same bus. It would go on the next bus, be in the following day.
And he allowed for that because then he's really separated
They're
from the
loading the
photos.
bus already, and they boarded him, and he got on the bus and came out. Picked him up at the bus station. I brought him out to the house. He was tired from traveling, and he laid on the sofa in the living room there, and I went to sleep. So we had the station checked to see if they could find a record of a package that was en route on the next bus. They didn't have any record of it. They said that's not normal. They don't usually know in advance anyway.
And at what point did Bob Dean get to meet him?
Well, I was anxious to tell somebody, and Bob was my next door neighbor, and I knew that I could depend on him to keep the secret. We were afraid that we were being watched by 4 men in a white carryall that circled the block. But he was living around the corner from me the whole time that Connor O'Ryan was there. He was keeping an eye on the house to see who else was hanging around or trying to look over the wall or anything.
Had Bob ever let you know about the details of S4 at this point in
Never
time?
discussed it.
Never discussed that at that
I
point.
was still keeping my oath of security, which I swore to.
Right.
But in '91, I gave that up. I said, "To hell with it! I'm going to tell it."
Let them do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Now, at what point did Bob find out that Connor O'Ryan was over at your house?
Connor was sleeping, and Bob came by in his sheriff's car, stopped in front to say hello, and I said, I got to tell you something. I've got a man in here says he was a sentry at level 2, and he's sleeping on the sofa now, but I don't know what to do with him. He said, well, just listen to his story, see what he's got to say. We don't know anything about that. And so we waited for him to wake up. And Bob had to go out back to duty. He got back in his patrol car and left. Came back again later that evening, stopped again. And it was the next day, wasn't it, when you came back about the third or fourth time, Connor was up, and I said, he's in the living room, but he's a little gun shy. If you want to take a look at him, that's what he looks like. I'll introduce you in a couple of days. Wasn't that it?
I think so. Yeah.
And what was your impression? Did you get a chance to meet Connor O'Ryan, Bob? And what was your
I
impression?
think I met him briefly, didn't I? I can't remember.
Just to shake hands. Connor didn't want to talk to anybody. He was scared, and Bob didn't want to get too involved in it. Bob was in uniform, and that was kind of scary to Connor.
I think that was wasn't that the time you asked me to take a video or something?
No, that was a little later, but
Yeah.
we can go into that. On Wednesday, all seemed normal, and we went out to breakfast. The young visitor asked a lot of questions about UFOs and my research. He said he found out about me and my interest in a book on UFOs among the very few on the subject in the Las Vegas Downtown Public Library. And he copied my name and address from it, and a call to the Tucson telephone directory gave him my telephone number. He said he was a U.S. Marine, a SEAL.
First of all, what's your background? Can you tell me something about your background?
Okay, well, I joined the Navy in the early 80s. I went into the Naval SEAL program and became a SEAL. I've been attached to the Special Forces and Special Operations Department of Naval Intelligence for approximately 8-9 years now. I've been on a number of covert operations, and just recently, well, about a year ago, I was assigned to a place in Nevada, which most people know as S4, as a sentry, which all sentries there are Special Forces personnel from all 4 military branches. I've been there for 9 months. I was there for 9 months. I've recently been discharged for medically, which I'm still checking that out. While my tour of duty there, I was a sentry in the complex, which is an extremely sensitive complex, which they have discs there. I have positively identified 7 of them, and I've also identified 7 humanoid creatures with like grayish skin. I don't know if that's because of the being in the tubes and the solution that they're placed in right now. Right now I'm basically on the run there. I don't want to mention any names or colleagues. I don't know what basically my destiny holds for me at this moment. I know that this has to be said and brought out, and I've made contact here with Mr. Stevens because I feel has adequate connections to someday bring all this out in the open.
He was a sentry from level 2 of S4. There were 8 of them on duty at a time, 8 of them, and a sergeant in charge. The sergeant sat at a desk that overlooked the patrol area. They had to walk a beat inside of level 2. They were supposed to be walking it at attention. They weren't supposed to be looking around. They were supposed to, they were there to arrest intruders if they came in. There were visitors that came from level 1 down to level 2 to go to levels 3 and 4, and if their right eye retinal scan and palm print and card didn't all match at the elevator, a bell would ring, and their job was to arrest and hold them until somebody came down from level 1 and carried them away.
And what was his name?
His name was Derek Hennessy. He used the name Connor O'Ryan at my house.
I don't know why I was picked for it. I have no idea at all. I've never expressed an interest in those or flying discs. I mean, publicly, you know.
So, when you were first informed that you were going to be doing guard duty on a secret base, were you given any kind of written military transfer orders? Or
No.
How did
I went to 36. I got off a submarine in Holy Lock, flew to Charleston, to Pensacola, to the Navy, San Diego. Went to 32nd Street, Naval facility there. I was briefed that I was transferred to a sentry duty in Nevada somewhere, which I know that everybody's pretty much aware of all the facilities out in the southwest region out here in Sequenza. I've already had a security clearance for entering some of these facilities. Nothing like this before. I had no idea that I was going to be involved in anything like this. I mean, when I first walked in, I was convinced that they were American prototype vehicles. The Americans were not until I viewed the bodies. Then I knew something was a little different.
So Connor O'Ryan starts telling you, Wendell, that he's been to S4, that he's been a sentry at level 2.
A sentry at level 2 of S4, and he told me that they live at that level. They have barracks facilities, they sleep in, their meals are catered into them. They're told not to talk to each other at level 4 except in front of the television set watching ball games or at the table where they're eating. Otherwise, they're not supposed to be talking at all. Their names were taken away when they got the jobs, and they were given numbers. They were supposed to address each other by number. They wore number tags, not name tags. And he said that they walked They're beat 4 hours on and 4 hours off round the clock. He was 29 years old, and for the last 9 months he had been assigned to Delta Force Team 6, a super elite cross-service activity that answered to none of the service commands but to a command line of its own, answering directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, I didn't know this even existed up to this time, and this was all new to me. He said he was, until 1 week ago, assigned to duty at S4 in Area 51 in the facility at the AEC reservation there in Nevada. He said he was a sentry who lived in quarters at the facility and whose duty post was on level 2 of a 4-level complex. He said there were no sentries below level 2, as all below that level was electronically controlled. And he did not know what was down there. And at level 2, they controlled access to 2 separate elevators that went down below, one to level 3 and another one to level 4. To use one of these elevators, it took a thumbprint and a matching retina scan of the right eye. Anyone who was not cleared by this process was immediately arrested, detained, and somebody came down from upstairs and got them. The sentries worked continuous shifts of 4 hours on and 8 hours off. They patrolled the area at station and were prohibited at attention and were prohibited from looking around or directly at anybody. They were not allowed to talk to each other or to anybody else in the facility. Socialization off duty was discouraged, and the little conversation or discussion that was allowed to take place in the facility was done in front of the television set and at their catered-in meals, which made everyone pretty much of a loner in the facility. They all came from different locations. None of them knew each other before they got there, and acquaintance was discouraged in the facility. These men were given annual physical examinations every 3 months, during which time they were always hypnotized for about 1 hour. Even their most secret thoughts were probed. These men were allowed 3 days of leave, of rest and recuperation leave in groups, taken to Las Vegas once a month. They were dropped off at the Imperial Palace Hotel on Las Vegas Boulevard in the forenoon of the first day and were picked up at 4 o'clock on the third day to go back to their facility. Rooms were provided in a special reserved section of the Imperial Palace maintained by the security agency in the back of the hotel. They were driven in a vehicle with blinded windows. They were offloaded in the hotel. They were picked up the same way and driven back to their home base in the same vehicle. Since they entered the area, the vehicle always had the windows blacked out. The men were, when they arrived back at their operating facility at S4, they were searched again. They were searched on the way out of the secured S4 facility and were searched again and given a polygraph test on the way back into the facility. And sometimes they were strip searched.
There's 15 sentries there that live on the base. We live in level 1. There's a barracks there, which gives us TV. The food there is all right. It's equivalent to being on a submarine, basically, the barracks quarters.
Of course, you had experience on a submarine.
Yes.
In preparation for this kind of isolation.
Yes, I've been on a 688 class submarine. I did 3 tours on it. We wore hats like this, but they were just all black. This is this old set of black uniform fatigues. The shirts were just the same, just like a regular camo fatigue jacket. Right. We carried Glock 9mm, which is a European-made 9mm, and sometimes we were distributed M16s, and sometimes we were distributed Ingram MAC-10s, 9mm.
What would be the occasion for changing the weapons? Anything in particular?
I think if they feel that there's an outside threat on the base, I don't know if that's just information that they're receiving or a sensor's been breached like the night before, and maybe an M16 would be better for a long range weapon, but a MAC-10 would be used just for in case somebody was going to sabotage the plan from inside personnel, or an overran, because a MAC-10 is excellent for an urban warfare, an urban weapon. An M16 would be a good long-range shot. There's no identification worn at the facility. No people walking around with identification cards.
No name tags, nothing.
No, but the sentries, there's no name tags on our uniforms. No. We don't wear no military medals. We don't. No stripes, no nothing. We wore black uniforms at night, and during the day we wore a brown uniform. No names were ever discussed. We called each other in the barracks just, by our ranks. We used rank only. And, we were ranked, individually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Detachment of 6 guys. At any given time, it was an actual detachment of 10 people, but in my detachment, we had all got there at the same time. We're all briefed at the same time, so I guess that they had relieved the whole complete detachment. But the other detachments, I know, were there for a little bit longer. As I say, we were on 4-hour shifts with an 8-hour off, 4 hours, 8 off, 4 on, 8 off. When we're off our shifts, we don't know what happens on other shifts. We're not briefed in any way whatsoever on anything that happened the night before or anything. We're told not to talk with any security personnel during any of our duties at all. We're not allowed to say one word. We're supposed to use peripheral vision at all times. We're not allowed to discuss any duties while we're in our cubicles at night, our barracks, as you could say. That's just the way it was.
There were audio pickups all through the place, and if they talked to anybody else, they were called in and treated.
Our sole thing to do is just to be a sentry, an idiot, a grunt. You're just standing there. And we don't hear no where everything's need to know, and we don't need to know nothing, so that's the way it was. None of the chain of command was ever discussed. Our boss was the man, the watch commander out front, which was in charge of all security. I have no idea who was in charge of the facility or who even ran the facility. Now, I've been in the Navy, so with the Special Warfare Department so long that you know better than to ask questions by now. The questions are just don't ask. As I said before, I've already been with the Special Forces for so long. I think that they really trusted me. I think they trusted everybody because we're basic grunts and everybody's expendable to them. And we can be written off very easily, like, hey, these Special Forces, you knew that, telling your parents he was in Nicaragua, he got shot, that's all you need, or you know what I mean, he died in an accident. Parents are going to accept that because they've already accepted the fact that you're a Special Forces personnel and high risk job.
He was a strong, healthy young man, robust. He joined the Marines and then stayed in the Marines, and he kept training up to a SEAL status and then a Black SEAL status, and which is the highest ranking or the highest trained level a Marine can reach. He was at a sergeant level when he was here, so he didn't have a real high Marine rank. But when I found the W4 in his wallet while he was taking a shower, he was drawing $72,000 a year on a commission from the CIA, which is about equivalent to a colonel grade. He had sparse blonde hair. It wasn't not real shaggy hair. He was he stood very erect. He looked like a Marine, like a soldier. He had blue eyes. He'd answer questions, but he didn't add a lot. If he didn't ask the question, you're not going to get any information. He wasn't very talkative. He had a tattoo on his right arm that he kept covered up, and he got a mark for each special mission carried out. Now, to him, his special missions were terminating enemies of the United States government. if they were characterized as enemies and they didn't want them to go to trial because information might come out that would be of a sensitive nature, they would just terminate them instead. And he understood that that was what he was doing, and that was his job. To me, it's murder. To him, it was a mission. He was also living the life of a government assassin. All the special troops there, apparently, were being used for the same purpose. And they thought those assassinations were called missions, special missions. They got a special bonus for each special mission and a hash mark on the arm. And these young men were selected when they were in their high teens, very impressionable age, and they looked for people that already were patriotic. And they worked on the patriotism in boot camp until they became so patriotic that they would weep when the flag would go up and down the flagpole. And they were training to take out America's enemies. And so for them to carry out one of these missions, all their leaders had to do was characterize somebody as a traitor or an enemy of the United States or a spy, and their job as top Marines was to take out the enemies of the country, and they would do it with no compunction. Even if it was a brother, they would do it, or a sister, a close relative, because they were trained to implicitly believe their leaders. Their leaders could not err, and so these missions were simply missions to kill spies, internal spies within the system, and they thought that's what they were doing, is ridding the system of its betrayers, of its traitors. He told me some interesting things about some of our Special Forces troops. I remember now, he was in the pay grade of either a lieutenant colonel or a colonel in the CIA. He was carrying out special CIA missions. To him, a CIA mission was something assigned by his superiors in the best interest of our country. And I found out that he was, in fact, a government hitman, that he had carried out his 18th hit just before he was reported to have incurred the disease. He had the physical where they discovered the disease and probably introduced it. At that point, he retained that hit order as some proof of what was going on, and he gave me a copy of that. That hit was to kill another American sergeant, an Army sergeant, a senior forces, Special Forces Green Beret sergeant in the American Embassy in Budapest. And he had just, he told me he didn't have a chevron mark for this. I never did get a count on a mark, but he had a lot of chevron marks, vertical marks in a certain part of the shield. When I asked him about his salary, he said he got $5,000 bonus for each special mission. And he had just finished his 18th. And by now I knew from seeing his papers that his special missions were murder, government executions. This is the hit order that he received under his, in the valise with his clothes was the hit order, and his instructions to report to, says, Ghostwalker, you are to report to the American Embassy in Budapest, Hungary. You will be received by S.A. Grey Wolf. As a unit, you will proceed to terminate ex-S.A. David T. Johnson. That's the hit order. And there's David T. Johnson. He was a Army Green Beret, staff officer in the American Embassy in Budapest.
Murdered by Connor O'Ryan.
By Connor O'Ryan, and his partner, they both put bullets in him. His partner was S.A. Grey Wolf.
Zoom in and you can see it's the CIA.
Connor O'Ryan was Ghostwalker. When they were on missions like that, they were not allowed to exchange names. He never knew who Grey Wolf was. He told me one time he was on a hit was partnered with a Vatican hitman on a hit. I didn't know the Vatican had hitmen. Did you?
I had heard that they did, that they had their own secret service, but I didn't know that they put out hits. But they control so much wealth, and they're so powerful within the scope of the planet that it makes sense. I mean, the leader of the Catholic Church right now is an ex-Nazi, right?
Yeah.
Pope
Ratzinger.
Benedict what's his name? Pope
Ratzinger is
Yeah.
Benedict XVI, yeah.
Benedict the 16th or whatever. He's ex-Nazi.
Ex-Nazi. Yeah, he was in Nazi youth, yeah.
Yeah. What's the purpose of this? Why is this in the file?
There was a helicopter crash in the S4 area that he told me that the crash was that the government sacrificed an airplane to get to dispose of 6 people. And these are people that the government killed off in Area 51 for reasons of their own. And they sacrificed a helicopter, sabotaged a helicopter, and killed them all on it. 3 of these workers were targets. The rest of them were accidental victims.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah,
Do they sometimes accident whole groups of people together like that?
I don't know. So I said, don't you think you might become vulnerable here someplace along the way, that you know too much? He said, I think that's what's happened now. He said the 18th mission was an American Army Green Beret sergeant working in the American Embassy in Budapest. He was in level 2 of S4 when he found a note under his pillow after he'd gone off shift. Report to his sergeant. The sergeant handed him an envelope and told him the car was waiting and they'd drive him to Las Vegas to the bus station. When he got to the bus station in Las Vegas, he knew, having done this before, that he would look for a key taped to the back of the locker. So he felt around the back of the locker, so he found a key taped there. It had the locker number. He opened the locker and took out a valise, a traveling valise, nice one, with a suit of clothes, shoes, socks, shirt, tie, and everything for business travel. And he put those clothes on and put his clothes back in the locker, his Marine clothes back in the locker, and took the bus down to Los Angeles and the airline ticket to Budapest. And had a schedule and everything else on, so somebody had already coordinated. He didn't have a long wait anyplace. He rode the airliner on the ticket, got off in Budapest, was met at the airport by a car from the embassy, driven by the intelligence officer of the American Embassy in Budapest. He was driven to the embassy where they took up his American clothes and money and gave him Hungarian clothes, shoes, money, gun, bullets, and a key to an apartment they had rented in a false name. He traveled on a false name from the facility to Budapest, another name in Budapest. He was paired with another hitman from another place, and they were given a mug sheet of their target, front and side views of his face, where he lived, where he shopped, the route he took to and from work, everything that they did, and they were given 3 days. On the second day, they executed him putting the groceries in his car in front of the supermarket with his 2 children in the car. This hurt him. But this man had been characterized to our Connor Orion as a traitor, selling secrets to the enemy, and they're trained to take care of traitors to this country. He never knew the man. He didn't know anything about him. He only believed his superiors that he's a spy, caught in the act, and he has to be eliminated. They don't want to take the trouble for a trial and exposure and all that sort of thing. They just want it to stop, and that's the way they stop it. So this was the 18th one that he had done. And he told me that many of the other people that he knew who were also intelligence officers in that facility were also used the same way, carrying out important missions in the interest of the United States government. And the living facilities are to keep them there, to keep them from moving around in the public. Almost all of them are special forces troops, and that's where they're cooled. If they're carrying out hit operations for the government, they, just like the mafia, they take them someplace and cool them. If there's any evidence leading to them, it's not going to go anywhere because you can't find him. And they're safely stashed out there. There are others being used the same way. You know, this appalls me that our United States government, with our tax money, is executing its own citizens without a trial, without benefit, with no proof, only the proof or the evidence supplied by the superiors who can tell any story, and that's frightening. It's frightening. So it didn't bother him at all about murdering people, except the last one, the 18th one, when he was sent to Budapest, Hungary, and found out that his target was a senior Army Master Sergeant in the Green Berets, just like himself, that had a lot of ribbons and medals and was getting paid well. And he was sent there to take him out. He was paired with another CIA agent, or another agent like himself, who was another Special Forces troop. And they were given Hungarian clothes and Hungarian weapons and ammunition, shoes and everything to do it. Mugshots of their hit, and where he lived, maps of where he lived, his routes that he traveled, where he went to church, where he went to the grocery store and everything. And they took him out together, one on each side of his car. When he came out of the grocery store with his groceries, putting them in his car, they hit him from both sides with his 2 teenage kids in the car. And they put 7 or 8 bullets in him, and he died. See, and they just pocketed their weapons and walked away in a crowd. They looked like everybody else there, and they went back to the American embassy, reported to the attaché, who gave them the clothes and the guns and the money. The attaché gave them their clothes, but traveling clothes back, and drove them to the airport, and they went home. Now that's what a mission was. These guys were exempt because they were carrying out a special mission, and they really believed this. They didn't feel bad about their hits, because they sincerely believed that they all were traitors and enemies of the country.
The pay we got I have always gotten demolition pay and junk pay being with the teams, but when we go on a covert out, we get hazardous duties pay. Now being with this detachment, we got hazardous duties pay too, which is extra.
So we are still paid to normal U.S. Navy.
Exact. E6. Setting up some first class pay rate with, I got jump pay if I made so many jumps in a year's time. Demolition pay, because we're demolition experts, being with the team, the UDT, and hazardous duties pay when we run hazardous operations, any kind of covert operate in a country that the American government considers hostile. I mean, you get a hazardous duty pay, like Nicaragua, or not.
Here is a photograph of Area 51 taken by a Russian satellite passing overhead. First of all, it's the Atomic Energy Commission area. The Navy had a Navy auxiliary airfield there that had arrestor gear on the runways that they practiced carrier landings on. And that's all it was. I used to stop there and get gas when I was ferrying aircraft across the country, because the gas trucks were always sitting there and they were not used very much, and I could get gas immediately. There was a little snack bar right at the operations center where I filed my flight clearance, and I'd take off and leave in a short time.
Was that Groom Lake?
That was Groom Lake Auxiliary Naval Airfield. And the last time I stopped there, I was coming from Troutdale, Oregon, going to Oklahoma City with a small trainer, a fixed base operator, about 10 of them from the surplus from up there. And I was carrying it through, and when I landed, they wanted a copy of my special orders. I told them, what special orders? They said, you can't land here without special orders. And I said, well, I've always landed here for gas. And they said, well, you have to have special orders now. And they did give me gas, but made me leave right away and made me understand that I can't come back.
What year was that, roughly?
That was in the early 50s. Later, I began to hear about a Project Red Light going on at Groom Lake. And when I tried to get information on Project Red Light, that was so secret that nothing was available, but I had I was doing a lecture at Oakland, California, when I mentioned Project Red Light, and the fact that they closed the base, nobody knows what they were doing there. And a guy came up out of the audience afterwards, talked to me. He said, I was a technical sergeant in the medical corps in the hospital detachment. He told me that when Groom Lake Auxiliary Airfield was closed, they brought in the reinforced CB battalion. They closed everything but the base engineers and the hospital. And the hospital served the reinforced CB battalion until they were almost through working, and then they brought in a hospital team to take over the hospital. But during the 2 years that they were servicing, they heard scuttlebutt about what they were doing. They took up the runway, they took down buildings and put up camouflage netting to make it look like nothing had changed. And when they got through, they put the buildings and the runway back. And that sergeant thought that they had only put extra facilities under the runway and some under the ramp, the parking ramp. But he never knew how big it was or anything. And that's all I had for some time, until I found at another lecture like that, a man came up to me, said that he was working in the CB battalion. He was a tech sergeant engineer, project engineer, and he told me about digging the 4 levels. And then they started putting the runway all back together again above. But he said that within those 4 levels, they prepared a habitat that had a controllable atmosphere in it. But he said that the CB battalion only dug the hole in the ground and laid some foundations. Then they brought in other contractors to put the facilities in on top of the foundations and finish it and put the runway back. So nobody ever had the whole project. It was always parceled out like that.
And that was the Groom Lake project,
That was
Area
Groom Lake.
51.
That was Area 51.
The most infamous and notorious secret military site in the world, Area 51 at Groom Lake, Nevada. A restricted government site that guzzles down black budget funds, hidden in plain sight, exotic, dangerous, highly classified. Parts of the complex require Q-30 clearance or higher. Above top secret and deadly, and may be controlled not just by human beings. Testimonies suggest that beings not of this earth may even share control of the base. Area 51 was originally constructed in 1955, 1 year after the Edwards and Holloman treaties in 1954 were arranged, clandestinely in utmost secrecy, between officials in the U.S. government and off-world beings who possessed highly advanced technologies that lured in the lusty, weapons-minded brass. Originally known as Watertown Strip in 1955, after CIA Director Allen Dulles' hometown, the growing base was later dubbed Paradise Ranch, now simply the Ranch. The 575 square mile rectangle of land was officially designated Area 51 outside the control of our 50 states by the Atomic Energy Commission in June 1958. The Area 51 control tower identifies itself as Dreamland in radio communications and warns off all aircraft from flying over the box, its forbidden airspace known officially as R4808N. Some insiders have even dubbed Area 51 the dark side of the moon. The town of Rachel, Nevada, with its population of just around 200 people, is known for the Little Alien restaurant, complete with its own UFO video and book library for patrons and visitors from all corners of the world. Just to the west of Rachel is a back gate guard entrance to the Nellis Bombing and Gunnery Range, 8 million acres large, inside whose boundaries is Area 51. The townsfolk of Rachel can see the 9,000-foot bald mountain peak just to the south, which is capped with an observation and communications facility directly connected with Area 51. Highway 375 runs through Rachel and along the northeastern perimeter of restricted land, which was officially dedicated in the mid-1990s as the Extraterrestrial Highway, a twisting 98-mile stretch of single-lane road, absent of gasoline stations anywhere. Amid the Joshua trees and cactus and tumbleweeds of Tikaboo Valley lives a generations-old cattle ranching family. The ranchers are known for their famous black mailbox which marks the commencement of a dirt road between mileposts 29 and 30 that leads toward their ranch, and also towards Groom Lake just beyond to the southwest. A little farther southeast on Highway 375, between mileposts 34 and 35, Groom Lake Road begins its trail across the desert floor of Tikaboo Valley toward Jumbled Hills. Almost every morning, buses with blacked-out windows carrying Area 51 workers speed along to the top-secret facilities by way of the Groom Lake Road. The perimeter of Area 51 shares a border with the Yucca Flat region of the Nevada test site, where over 900 atomic tests have been conducted since 1951. Beginning in July 1962, all its atomic detonations were exploded underground, but for what purpose remains unclear. The Area 51 land is managed by the 99th Air Base Wing at Nellis Air Force Base. However, Area 51 is also an adjunct to Edwards Air Force Base Flight Test Center, which appears to have control of operations at Groom Lake. And just 40 miles southwest of Groom Lake is the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Storage Facility. Groom Lake is a dry salt lake located in Emigrant Valley, north of the Papoose Mountain Range, and Area 51 is on Groom Lake's southern shore. In 1995, federal land grabs have expanded the scope of the base and eliminated certain mountaintop viewing spots for civilians, including Whitesides Mountain and Freedom Ridge, despite substantial public outcry. Intruders are subject to the use of deadly force, which was supposedly authorized under the terms of the 1950 McCarran Internal Security Act. Enforcing security are hired personnel from Wackenhut and Sandia security companies, along with a contingent of Navy SEALs and Delta Force. Black Hawk and Sikorsky helicopters, Jeeps and Humvees patrol constantly, seeking out intruders using every technology at their disposal. The ranch, as insiders know it, is the most protected known base on the planet's surface, and its personnel are required to take a lifetime oath of secrecy. Area 51 is likely run by the United States Navy, even while it appears the Air Force maintains operations out of Edwards Air Force Base in California. The radar facilities always have at least one radar pointed straight up to monitor the skies above, as it is well known that modern satellites from foreign nations can see through topsoil with synthetic aperture radar and infrared imaging to detect tunnels below the surface. Strangely, due to the Open Skies Treaty of March 24, 1992, member countries signing the treaty are allowed to use satellites to take photos of the Area 51 base in exchange for the U.S. being allowed to spy on other treaty-signing nations' top-secret facilities. Participating countries include the Soviet republics, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, Turkey, Ukraine, Norway, Denmark, Poland, and Romania. Ironically, the American taxpayers that foot the bills for Area 51 are not allowed any information regarding Area 51, even those Americans who have suffered chemical contamination working at Area 51, for court cases seeking due compensation for their injuries. Incoming flights come from several key installations, all directed by the control tower, situated about 1/4 mile northeast of an enormous 100-foot-tall hangar, suspected of housing a giant elevator that can lower heavy tonnage aircraft down to a vast underground complex below. Along with Area 51, Bechtel controls Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and a host of the most sensitive nuclear weapons facilities for the U.S. Department of Energy. Defining the word cronyism, the Bechtels have lorded over White House political decision-making for decades, especially administrations headed by Nixon, Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. It was Bechtel that was awarded the no-bid contract for Hurricane Katrina relief. Bechtel is where our tax dollars go to die. George Shultz and Caspar Weinberger are Bechtel alums, and so are former NATO Supreme Allied commanders. Among Bechtel's many major construction projects are countless oil platforms, refineries, and pipelines, including the Alaska Pipeline and countless tracks of railroad, including the entire BART urban transit system in San Francisco. Bechtel and its partners built the Hoover Dam project and the ARCO experimental breeder reactor, which produced the first ever electric power from a nuclear source, leading to Bechtel gathering the largest contracts for the biggest nuclear power plants worldwide. Unfortunately, numerous hazardous waste violations, ballooning profits in Boston's Big Dig, outrageous behavior in the reconstruction of Iraq, inciting Bolivians to riot against Bechtel, which was trying to privatize the water supply, and membership in the Trilaterals, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Bohemian Grove has not endeared Bechtel to the vast population of tax-paying Americans. In terms of financial transparency, Bechtel is not. As a private multinational corporation with a jaw-dropping list of subsidiaries, Bechtel is much more opaque than all publicly held multinationals, having no need to go public for money. Only big oil money like Avery Rockefeller's money is capable of behaving like this. Now Bechtel wants control of the world's fresh water supplies. Bolivia told Bechtel, no way in hell. The control tower ushers in the Janet facility flights operated by EG&G from Las Vegas' McCarran International Airport, but personnel are also purportedly brought in from Lockheed's Skunk Works facilities in Palmdale, from Lawrence Livermore Laboratory in San Francisco, and from Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico. Area 51's main runway is 30,000 feet long, nearly 6 miles, which when compared to runways where the Space Shuttle lands, which are barely half that size at 3 miles, makes Area 51's runway seem extreme. Area 51's southern hangars have held the A-12 Oxcart and the SR-71 Blackbird, and likely craft much more exotic. The northern hangars, or Red Hat hangars, house what is dubbed captured foreign technology, which is disassembled and blueprinted. Other buildings and facilities allow for on-site avionics modification, but below the buildings is a deep underground tunnel complex with tunnels 30 feet high and 70 feet wide, and what goes on there only a few brave souls have ever shared publicly. Most personnel choose to enjoy the privileges of a top-secret base. Key personnel are spoiled with lavish meals at Sam's Place, a recreational facility for members of Club Fed. Worker housing buildings are on site for lower-level personnel that live on the base. The most insidious of the dangers for the lower-level Area 51 workers was the chemical contamination from waste burned in open pits and trenches at Groom Lake. In 1994, law professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University represented Area 51 widows of government contractors Walter Kazaa and Robert Frost and sued the Air Force and Environmental Protection Agency. Professor Turley demonstrated in court that high levels of dioxin, dibenzofuran, and trichloroethylene led to skin, liver, and respiratory failures and death in numerous Area 51 personnel. However, the United States Air Force responded by classifying all evidence of contamination in order to skirt the lawsuit, according to Congressman Lee Hamilton. Furthermore, the federal government invoked the state secrets privilege, citing the lawsuit as a threat to expose national security secrets. U.S. Judge Philip Proe rejected the government's argument, so a Majestic 12 lapdog, President Clinton, issued a presidential determination exempting the Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada. Clinton's action forced Judge Proe to dismiss the case for lack of evidence. Turley appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the grounds that the federal government was abusing its power, but the Ninth Circuit refused Turley's appeal, and the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. 60 Minutes ran their investigative inquiry on March 17, 1996, in which Congressman Lee Hamilton stated, "I'm not personally prepared to take the word of a person who has, or an entity which has, a huge financial stake in the outcome here, that this information needs to be classified." Professor Jonathan Turley added, "The question is whether they are going to be held accountable, because ultimately that is what this case is about. Whether there is something unique about the United States government that either makes it accountable or exempt from its own laws." While Area 51 has produced aviation advances for the U-2, SR-71, F-117, B-2 stealth bomber, it has also secretly produced the still unacknowledged TR-3Bs and Aurora spacecraft. And besides devouring hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe even trillions, for its projects, the federal government is also turning a blind eye on billions of dollars of fraud and tax evasion by selected government contractors who are not claiming the true taxable value of their facilities to the Lincoln County tax assessor, who is not even allowed into Area 51 to perform his county's tax assessments. Area 51 has claimed only $2.5 million of property value to Lincoln County, even while accepting annual budgets in the billions of dollars from us, the American taxpayers. Dangerous underground atomic detonations, nuclear storage and waste concerns, the use of deadly force against civilians, lavish treatment of high officials, uncompensated chemical contamination of its workers, abuse of the law and its own power, tax evasion, and evidently secret extraterrestrial alliances. These improper government practices should impel Congress to hold open investigations into the nearly 60-year history of corporate and federal abuses at Area 51.
Area 51 is a big area. It has the Groom Lake Naval Auxiliary Airfield in the valley with a long runway in the dry lake bed, but through the mountain in the next salt valley south, and you got there's a mountain range in between, and there's a tunnel now that runs all the way from Groom Lake through to S4. It's about 8 miles through mountains. That tunnel is over. The tunnel is over 100 feet wide, and nearly 100 feet from top to bottom, and that's where super secret aircraft are stored. It becomes a huge hangar. And the vehicles can be taken out either the S4 end or the Groom Lake end. S4 is where the hangars were built at the end of that tunnel on opening into the valley is where S4 facilities were built, and they were built into the mountain, but they were camouflaged. They had a side of the mountain slid aside and to make the doors, it rolled away and opened the facility, and that's how they took the captured vehicles in and out. Was they'd roll the door back and take them out, and when the Russian satellites had already passed or were not due, they bring them back in before the satellites were due again.
Did you ever hear talk about S4?
Let me explain something about Area 51. It was, at the time, simply a range as part of Camp Mercury. When you look at the map, you had areas such and such, 49, Area 50, Area 51. These were all part of the original Camp Mercury atomic test site facility. So 51 was part of Camp Mercury initially. And while I was there, I was a Department of Energy school in 1979. And the weekend in between, and some of the contractors who dined with us in the mess hall, we'd gotten to know pretty well. They were instructors as well. They said, look, let's all hop on the bus after breakfast on Saturday. They invited us to hop on the bus, and we're going to show you guys something. So away we went on this fairly rickety old bus, wasn't one of the more modern, more comfortable ones. And down the road we went over a pass into Groom Lake from the other side, from the rear. I never went through the mailbox out on the roads kind of garbage. We came in from the back over to Groom Lake. And they took us over to one of the facilities, and we got out of the bus. And anyhow, never made it to S4, but I heard the contractors talking about it. And some of them were contractors who were involved in the construction. They said that S4 had 30 levels. You take a 30-story building, put it in the ground, and that's where apparently the aliens were. And some of the contractors had seen them.
What were their
They
descriptions?
had not got very close to them. Well, they appeared to be kind of like grays, but not the little ones. These were 5.5 feet tall, or 6 feet even. They were grays, and they had a fairly large eye, but they were not the little guys with the wraparound eyes. I was to learn later that those little dudes are laboratory products.
Organic robots.
Yeah, they're organic robots, I guess is the best description. At the very bottom of this thing at S4, there was a gate. A retired bird colonel shared with me. He said, I went down to level, the lower level, the 30th floor. He says, they told me to put on a summer uniform, and it was wintertime. He went down, they had his luggage and suitcase and his briefcase and all. And he stepped through the doorway and he came out and he was at, what's the middle of Australia? Pine Gap.
Pine Gap? Mm-hmm.
He went through a door at S4 and on the other
It
side
came out
was
at
Pine
Pine
Gap.
Gap.
Australia.
Yeah.
So
Which
they already
we-
had teleportation at
Which
that
were
point.
we were to learn later was just a mile and a half from one of the major UFO ET installations on the planet. The ETs had had a facility there for apparently over 100 years. The retired colonel told me, he said, you know, I was in a state of shock. He said, I didn't feel a thing. He says, I went through the door, I'm in S4 in Nevada. He says, the next thing I'm coming up, being led off to a private set of quarters in a facility that is in Pine Gap, Australia. And he says, it took me a while to adjust to it, he says.
When we were sitting down together with Bob Dean says he heard that S4 had 30 levels, which are 3 sections of 10 levels each, coded green, blue, and red. But I gather from your 10 days with Connor Ryan that he only knew about 4 levels.
He only knew about 4 levels.
And
He never saw anything at 3 or 4.
do you subscribe to Bob Dean's description from somebody?
I don't have any information on the other levels.
Do you think they exist? Or do you think there are only 4?
I don't know. If they exist, they would have been dug after the initial red light project that set up the facility there, the first 4 levels.
I think one of the things that impressed me the most about what the contractors would share with us is that they were in the tunnel building business, and they were digging tunnels all over the damn place. And they had these big 40-foot tunnel boring machines, you know, on railroad tracks. They'd go into the side of a mountain, literally, and they would go down and then out. And they were laughing one time. They said they were digging a tunnel and they ran into another tunnel, which they didn't know about.
Really?
And they said the tunnel they ran into was better than the one they were building. And all our ears perked up. And I said, what? He says, this thing was beautiful. He says, it was big and it was smooth and the walls were like glass. And he says, we built this damn thing. The ones we were building were, you know, rough and not too ready, and we had to plaster them and, you know, finish them up a bit, cement and all to make them livable. But he says, we ran into a series of tunnels that were incredible. And what we were going to do is we were going to get a Jeep loaded up with, you know, spotlights and water and whatever, and we were going to explore. And one of our senior supervisors, he said, found out about our plan and threatened to court-martial or put us all in jail. And he said, you stay the hell out of those tunnels. Those are not ours. Those are not for you to look at. You leave them alone. And he said, all among themselves, who the hell built those tunnels, you know? Well, who had the technology to build those that good? And here we are digging these things in. When I retired, we knew officially at my level of security that there were 4 different groups that we were interrelating with. They were all humanoid, but only one was human, or at least so much like us that you couldn't tell the difference. Technologically, they are so far beyond us that we can't even imagine it. And I think spiritually they are so far beyond us. And I think those are the ones that are really calling the shots. I think those are the ones that are really in charge of the program. And You see other aliens, you see little grays, you see tall grays, you see tall whites with no hair at all. You even see, some of the people have described seeing reptilians. I don't deny that. I don't doubt that for a moment. But I've concluded that the one group that seems to be running the program, at least on planet Earth, are the Anunnaki from Nibiru, our cousins, our forefathers, as it were.
So it's possible that they had built those tunnels.
I think so. They said that there were tunnels all over the damn place. There were tunnels going from Groom Lake to Nellis, which is what, about 10 miles, 20 miles, something like that. There were rumors that some of the tunnels went over to Fort Huachuca, which is in southern Arizona.
And you had been stationed there at one time.
And I had been stationed at Huachuca. And I knew there were some, mysterious goings on there, but anyhow, they said that there were tunnels all over the place. So when I hear these rumors about tunnels across the continent with high-speed rail, yeah, I'm not surprised.
So the Phil Schneider reports about underground tunnels and some of the maps that he provided, that kind of thing, do you guys have problems with that?
It makes sense to me.
I know the chemical structure and the application of construction value explosives. I earned a reputation on it. I helped hollow out over 13 deep underground military bases in the United States. I worked on the Malta project. I worked on West Germany on its military bases, in Spain on its, and Italy on its. Anyway, of these 129 bases, they've been building them day and night unceasingly since the early 40s. Some of them were built even earlier than that. The average depth of each base is roughly a mile deep. They are basic whole cities hollowed out underground. They're somewhere between 2 2/3 cubic miles and 4 1/4 cubic miles hollowed out underground. And these bases comprised basically of large cities underground. They're connected by high-speed monorail magneto-leviton trains that can go up to Mach 2. Several books recently have been written about this activity, all of which is verifiable through bibliography. Richard Sauder's book, he's a PhD architect, and he alone also is risking his life by talking about this. He worked with a number of government agencies on deep underground military bases. I have helped build two main concerned bases within these United States that have some significance as far as what is it called the New World Order. Number one is Dulce, New Mexico. I was involved in 1979 in a horrendous firefight with alien human type, whatever you want to call them. And I was one of the survivors. I'm probably the only talking survivor you'll ever hear. Two other survivors are under close guard somewhere in these United States. One is not in very good shape. He's living in Canada. So I'm about the only one around that knows the firefight, that knows all the detailed files of the entire operation. 66 Secret Service agents, FBI and the like, Black Berets died in that firefight. I was there. My father, Otto Oscar Schneider, there's an interesting story about him. He fought on both sides of the war. He was originally a U-boat captain. He was captured, he was captured by the French, he was turned over to the United States Army, he was turned over to the United States Navy. He was repatriated here to Cocoa Beach, Florida and Fort Lauderdale, and taken up to Philadelphia Navy Yard thereafter, and he was a master machinist as well as an MD doctor. He later became an MD doctor and never did anything with it. But basically, he was involved with different kinds of concerns, such as A-bomb and H-bomb and Philadelphia experiment and these other kinds of projects. His groundwork, He invented a camera, a high-speed camera that took pictures of the first atomic tests in Bikini Island on 12th of July 1946, to which I have original photographs of, which show unidentified flying objects fleeing the bomb site at a high rate of speed. Bikini Island at the time was infested with the things in various depths of its waters. The natives always saw them. The natives had problems with their cattle, basically pigs is what they raised, and other things. Though this story has never come out, this is basically what happened. Maybe somebody knows a senator or a congressman or has had help by such. There's one outstanding in Oregon. His name is Mark Hatfield. That man helped me fight the federal government. See, my father left me these pictures of what he took at Bikini Island, Operation Crossroads. And I'm going to have this one out on the table. It's the original. I'll ask you please carefully handle it and try not to put too many fingerprints on it. Right over here, and I'll point to it, Hey, Echo, is a structure that is an unidentified flying object. This was taken 12th of July, 1946. Federal government at that time knew all about flying saucers, what they were and what their agenda was, and how they want to control us by world domination. Without question, they knew about it. UFOs really wasn't my bag until I started work at Area 51, which is in the Nellis Air Force Base north of Las Vegas, Nevada. The Guardians of Stealth. There are over 3 distinct classifications of special police used to guard one of our most well-kept secrets. Number 1, this is the most disturbing of all. The MJTF, and that, by the way, that stands for Military Joint Tactical Force, otherwise known as the Black Berets. Some people call them the Delta Force, and there are other names for it. A multinational tactical force primarily used to guard the various stealth aircraft worldwide. Stealth aircraft, for instance, the F-117A, there's 157 of the son of a guns going around. You know their sole purpose is? They're all loaded with LIDAR, L-I-D-A-R, and SEER, computer-enhanced imaging radar. They can fly over your house. They can see you walking from room to room. They can tell if you've got an old antique rifle on your mantelpiece. They can see objects in the house with a variation limit and capability of 1 inch to 30,000 miles. That's how accurate this is. Is this the proper use of our tax money? I would say not. The Black Budget is a secretive group, basically a secret budget. It garners 1/4 of the gross national product, the entire gross national product of these United States. At present, the gross national product is around $5 trillion. So 1/4 of that's about $1.25 trillion per year. At least 1.023 trillion, and I say at least, is used in black budget programs like deep underground military bases. Presently, there are 129 deep underground military bases in these United States. Still, 68% of the U.S. military budget is directly or indirectly affected by the black budget. Star Wars, otherwise nicknamed Star Wars, Strategic Defense Initiative, relies heavily upon stealth weaponry. By the way, none of this would have been available without us taking apart with a fine-tooth comb crashed flying saucers that either we downed or they crashed themselves into our deserts. None. Budget from U.S. Congress 5-year plan that we're told about is $247.6 million. You couldn't buy the spare parts of all the black helicopters and the F-117As and the B-1, the B-2 bomber, and all the other 24, 25 prototypes. Couldn't even get the nuts and bolts for that. So we've been lied to, folks, and I know we can do better. Black budget garners this figure, roughly $1.25 trillion every 2 years. Trillion. I'm not talking billion, folks. Trillion. If you don't know what a trillion is, it's 1,000 billion. It's a big number. If you were to regard that in dollar bills, it would be 11 tons of dollar bills. That's how big a trillion is. Okay. The black budget literally means hidden budget. The U.S. Congress never sees the books of this clandestine pot of gold. Contractors of stealth, and I've listed quite a few here. EG&G, Westinghouse, McDonnell Douglas, Morrison Knudsen, Wackenhut Security Systems, Boeing Aerospace, Lorimar Aerospace, Aerospatiale of France, Mitsubishi of Japan, also Mitsubishi Heavy Electric Industries, Ryder Trucks, Bechtel, IG Farben, that's a chemical company, plus a host of hundreds more. Now, I've talked about a number of topics that are rather controversial. I'm not advocating the overthrow of any government. I don't believe in such for the main reason. The number one, it always kills the wrong folks. But I believe if I have the chance to tell people about these atrocities, I think that there will be some serious letter writing, if not letter writing, some serious conscientious voting done in the very near future on various elected government officials, if not the whole category of elected government officials.
Now, the construction of S4 happened then after the construction of Groom Lake.
S4 followed Groom Lake, yes.
Okay, so describe what you know about the construction of S4, how that occurred.
Well, they started tunneling from Groom Lake back into the mountain for secure facilities, and they kept tunneling over the years. They kept tunneling till they came out the other end down there, and that's where they put the captured alien vehicles. But that's where our most secret aircraft were stored too, is right next to the captured vehicles up the tunnel towards Groom Lake.
There's 4 levels in Site 4, excluding the top level, the surface, which is basically a hangars with the satellite. There's really not too much to it, but the levels are all operated. There's the first and second levels are all elevator, where they keep the flying disc, ships, whatever you would call it. They bring it to the surface. Right when I was there, they were trying to operate the disc, but to my viewing, unsuccessfully. There's scientists there. I've personally witnessed high White House officials being there.
Was there any reference to any of those dry lake beds?
No.
By name?
I didn't hear any. I mean, as I said, I was just being the sentry there. You didn't hear nothing.
Was it called S4 or A4?
S4.
S4.
We called it, it was called the museum.
So for you to actually leave base or get on base, they would take you down in a government vehicle and drop you off, what, in Las Vegas?
At the Tropicana Hotel.
The Tropicana. So that was the pick-up and drop-off point?
At 12 o'clock on a Thursday evening at the end of each month. If it fell on a Thursday, usually it was on the last Thursday of each month. And they would rotate. Every week they were taking somebody for their weekend they were rotating their sentries. Yes, they dropped us off at the Tropicana, on Tropicana Boulevard, right in the back. And they just dropped us off.
And you had to stay with your group of people?
No. We could venture off and do what we wanted to. Like I said, if you can get me in view of the facility itself, or get me in the thing, I could recognize where I'm at and get on with it. Because we could see through the front windshield driving, but you just didn't. There was like a cover gate, like a boot in a camper, like a little gate, and then the guy could shut it and open it at any given time. Most of the time, it was open partially. You don't know where the hell we're going. My first thing, I thought, that I was going to a secret Navy base myself, and then we got out, and that was it. My first visit.
But how long would you ride from you left from Nellis, did you?
Vegas.
From Vegas. How long would you ride from Vegas until you got to this facility?
Well, we'd ride to Nellis, and then Nellis we'd ride for about another hour, stop for about 20 minutes, ride for another half hour, stop, ride for another hour, stop for about 10, 20 minutes to relieve ourselves, which was in back of the van. Then the guy would come around and empty the thing. I think that they drove us around endlessly sometimes, you know.
Because it was different times.
Different times. Sometimes we'd be there in 4 hours, sometimes it'd be, 3 hours, sometimes it'd be 6 hours. It was, I mean, the security for the place for arriving and getting there is extremely strict. They don't...
So you couldn't sit down with a map and try to trace the route. It'd be impossible.
Yeah, I mean, even if you were sitting there, even if you're not allowed to have a pad and pencil in the van going there anyways. You're not allowed to, they take your watches, so you lose track of time. I mean, you get your watches and jewelry back when you get onto the facility itself.
You're not allowed to carry a pen?
No.
So they didn't get to see the routes to and from as the transportation came and went. They weren't able to look out once they were in the bus. The facility, the doors were closed and then the windows were blacked out. Nobody could look in and they couldn't look out.
Wackenhut intelligence people controlled
The Area 51 area.
They were driven in by Wackenhut and they were watched by Wackenhut. They could leave the facility, but they couldn't. Nobody could leave alone. They had to leave together at least, and they were required to watch each other.
Has any employee of Wackenhut ever come out and described being a guard and what their duties were around Area 51, Groom Lake, or S4?
Yeah, I don't know of any.
So they're able to keep those people fairly quiet compared to some of the military people.
The business they're in, I guess they're scared enough, so they keep quiet. They drove them all the way back to S4, and it drove into a covered facility where they were taken out and went right into the reception room for level 1, which is all they ever saw.
We didn't discuss nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, it was how the football team's doing, and basic talk. We didn't never discuss. We get picked up in the van, never go there, so we can sit in there, nice comfortable ride. We get to the gate, and that's it. That's the way I always got there. I never personally drove there. I mean,
was the gate an external gate? Was outside where the
van
went through?
You drove through and went into this little overhang, like an inspection center.
Like a shelter. Oh, okay.
You get out,
walk through a door, and you're
thumbprint, and then once that passed, present identification, and then they take you to the other gates, and they take you into the infirmary room, where not the infirmary, but where the watch commander is, and they take us in and they individually polygraph us real quick. We had to sit in there. We couldn't go anywhere to your cubicles or anything
until after you'd been polygraphed.
After you were polygraphed, you went into that room. You never were told if you passed or whatever. If you passed, I assume you just went back to work. Like they post a watch schedule where you're going to be, and then that was it. I don't know of any, how would you say, interaction between any of the agencies that are involved. To be honest, I don't even know who's really running the facility. I've heard it was ONI, but I don't think so. The sheriffs have strict, that's all government land. That there's absolutely, if a sheriff comes on the land without authorization, then we have orders to shoot. There's no question, no badge. I mean, there's no limits to what. Now, if a sheriff catches anybody, I don't know, because I've never been there when a sheriff caught anybody or anything like that. But they're not called out. We don't call out outside any kind of outside law enforcement intervention whatsoever. They usually deal with security all by themselves.
How many people do you think are on the facility total?
The levels 1 and 2, and the ground levels, I'd probably have to say maybe 75. Levels 3 and 4, I believe there's a whole new set of barracks down there. As I say, we see people coming and going. As long as they get through that elevator, they come up to it. We don't ask no questions. If that light hits red, then we detain people. I mean, believe it. I've never detained. We've never detained me. I've never witnessed anybody being detained at the facility.
Okay. Do you want to talk about any of the base security systems? detection equipment?
Yes, I know a little bit about it. Within a circumference of 200 yards completely surrounding the facility is all completely mined with explosives, what they call a C-26, which is a really super high and intense plastic explosive, a lot different than C4, a lot more dense. Then there's an infrared systems around, but there's 4 snipers on duty at all times with starlight scopes. And then there's laser setups all around, which presented a problem a lot of times because of the vermin outside would penetrate it. I believe the last 2 months I was there, they upgraded it so it had to be somebody walking on 2 legs to completely tow it. It had to be an upright walking person to penetrate it instead of a 4-legged. I mean, I guess these things, from what I've told, can determine weight when something walks through it, which are, I believe, are about 2 feet off the ground, which are disguised, I believe, in cactus. I've never seen anything out there, but that's what I've been told is out there. I mean, when we go out on a search patrol, they'll turn it off when the search patrol. So if anybody was going to penetrate the base, if you're looking at a search patrol, then you know it's all right to get through the laser system, to get through that security type of blanket. To get through the mines and stuff, you'd have to be an experienced. You're going to have to crawl on your belly for at least a half of a mile and jab and move before you can get through it. I mean, if they go off and you're within a 10-foot vicinity, then you'd be dead. You'd be vaporized, because that C-26 is a classified. I mean, it's supposed to be classified. I don't know what too many people know about it, but it's a high-grade explosive. It's a lot more volatile than C4. As I say, satellites pass over that area, especially, I mean, Eastern Bloc satellites used to pass over. I don't know about now, but in the last couple of months it's pretty, I don't know, but I assume they're still passing them over. They pass over pretty periodically, and they shut that place down. There's one satellite, I don't know the name of it, but when it passes over, we shut it down completely until it's completely off, then they open it back up again.
Bring everything inside when the satellite is due.
It's like once every 2 days or something like that. It'll zip around. I know I assume it's a Russian, or it might even be one of ours that they don't want ours, with a high sensitivity to see, some guy at the National Security Agency pretty much controls with Cheyenne, they jointly control those satellites. So.
He knew that sometimes the craft from level 2 were taken up to level 1 and taken out. They had to wait for the Russian satellites to pass. They'd get them all ready, so as soon as it passed, they could take them out and work on them until it was due again. They'd bring it back in and close the doors once more.
Okay, this is the dirt road comes on in. This is guardhouse 1. You have to drive into an enclosed building, a little one. Guard comes out, you go over here for a thumbprint check and your identification. There's 2 other gates you gotta go through, but being security personnel, we never had to go through that. We would just go straight through. Now the facility here is the ground level facility where they bring the disc up themselves. There's a door right here. Completely opens up. There's a big satellite and kind of in the rear here, and there's one in the front over here. It's usually pointing straight up at all times. The mess hall is over in this corner. There's a door to the parking lot, which is a wall, and you can come right into the mess hall. It goes around, which is a hallway. Over here is what do you say here? CIC Center, like on a ship, where they monitor satellites and anything if anything's moving over the facility, then they'll shut it down for a while. I've never been in it. I've looked inside it, but I've never walked in and looked in it. It looks like a submarine-controlled CIC room. Over here is a big access door. Now they bring the disc up one at a time. They never bring up more than one at a time. These are like the platforms that they bring them up on. And move it right on out, bring it on outside if they're going to try to activate it in some way or anything like
So
that.
this is like an open hangar, elevator platform.
Yes.
From the lower compartment.
A big old hangar. Yes. Not big. It doesn't look very big from the outside. I mean, it's because the discs themselves aren't very. I mean, you know, they're. I mean, yeah, I would say it's about 30 feet, 35 feet to the top. This is all open right in here. This is, there's a lot of equipment laying around. I don't even know when I begin to explain what it is because I have no idea really what it is. It looks like a car tune-up garage. I mean, with all kinds of computer diagnostic stuff. And
That's under a roof then.
that's all this is under a roof except for the parking lot over here.
Okay, how about a runway? Landing or taking off airplanes?
I've never seen airplanes land or take off. I've seen helicopters come and go, which is a pad about half a block back. It's like a little helo pad.
This is his sketch of the layout at level number 1, showing the disposition of the facilities on the floor. He does not show the bays there over here.
Yes, level 1 is basically your living quarters. It's 4 security detachments. All each has their own thing. One security detachment takes care of complete exterior of the facility around it constantly. One security detachment is gate and entrance. One security detachment is the levels, what I did, which is 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And detachment 1 is your snipers. They keep everybody compartmentalized. We're not allowed to interact with any other security detachments whatsoever. We're not allowed to talk to them. We can talk to the people in our detachment only, you know, for a ball game, regular shop, no shop talk or anything like that. And then back here, right here is like, let's see, right here is a medical infirmary that they do. There's a naval corpsman. They give us physicals once every 3 months. Right here is another security office where we go through light polygraph examinations. Right here is pictures of everybody. It's like an office break room, like, but there's pictures of everybody with the exception of the people on level 3 and 4. This is all open right here, see, because it's all you see is a brick wall, a block wall. Okay, first thing we do is we go to gate number 1. We all line up, which is usually 4 of us at the same time we get picked up. We all subject our thumbs to a print, taken into a back, ushered through the next 2 gates, taken into level 1. There's an office there. We go through a polygraph examination. After the polygraph examination, if your results were bad, which I've never heard of anyone being bad, I mean, or flunking your polygraph thing, I don't know what happened to you. I mean, no one's never just disappeared from the security detachment I was with. But you're subjected to a polygraph examination every time you come back from your 1 weekend of leave.
How is Bob Lazar connected to S4?
Bob Lazar was hired to do some back engineering on a certain disc. He called it the space sport model. Was when we got a look at the outline of the disc, it was very close to the shape of the version 2 flying disc that Billy Meyer was photographing in Switzerland. Bob Lazar said the seats were smaller. They were for smaller people than him. There was only 3 seats. Billy described 3 seats aboard the craft. The outside shape was very much the same. led us to speculate on where that craft came from. I began looking for sketches done by Bob Lazar over various interviews. Here's some of the sketches done. These were done for Best Evidence, a video documentary Best Evidence. And he made other sketches for other presentations. He eventually sketched all of the craft at level 1, and there were some that were quite different. These are images that it came from various interviews with Bob Lazar. This is an interview for a document drawn by Bob Lazar also. I don't know where he got the image of the alien. I don't know that he had any contact with aliens. So there's the last sketch by Bob Lazar.
Do you think it was possible that Orion was a CIA disinformation agent who was posing as a S4 sentry to discredit Lazar's testimony or confuse Lazar's testimony?
He didn't seem to know anything about Lazar's testimony.
I've personally heard of Bob Lazar, but I personally just heard of him in the last 2 months I was there. We were never told anything about him. As I say, I think when they transferred security, I think they did it complete detachments to completely eliminate, and I don't know what they do with the rest of the personnel because I've never got to that stage. I was discharged for medical reasons because I'm basically medically unfit to perform my duties anymore. Bob Lazar, I don't know too much about him. I know I can't say for sure if he was a resident there. I've never seen any photographs of him, but they keep all that under wraps. If there have ever been security breaches, they're not going to tell you. I've never heard his name mentioned at the facility. But from what I hear, he describes the facility very good in detail.
He was only hired by the Atomic Energy Commission people to do some back engineering because of his engineering expertise. Others later, Huff and John Lear, went to where Bob Lazar lived in Los Alamos, and they got pictures of his house. They got a telephone book with his address at that house in it and his telephone number. They even found a picture in the newspaper of him showing his home-built jet car. So that made Edward Teller the liar in the whole deal. He knew Bob Lazar.
What else do you know about Ed Teller in connection with Area 51, Groom Lake, and S4?
Well, Edward Teller was the head of the Atomic Energy Commission and was therefore the overall head of all of the Groom Lake operations. S4 and Area 51, all of it. They had Edward Teller, for instance, one time, who was the head of all of the Atomic Energy Commission facilities, which included Area 51 and Los Alamos and all the big, most secret facility this country has. He said he told them he didn't know anything about UFOs. At the same time, we know that a few years before that, in 1968, he held a conference in his center facilities there at Los Alamos for 18 people, a progress review conference, to find out why we hadn't solved the technical problems on an operational UFO that we had recovered, and one of the alien occupants of that UFO is sitting across the table from my friend Bill Uhouse, an engineer, a simulator engineer there, who was working with the alien on trying to bridge the technology between their technology and ours. And from 54 to 68, they hadn't succeeded in making any real significant progress. And this is what the meeting was all about. Why aren't we able to do this? And the alien indicated that their technology requires a certain amount of mental input that we have never learned to impart.
So maybe it has to do with a certain type of brainwave activity, and you have to be in a certain
brainwave pattern too that we are not familiar with. And here's the same guy sitting at the head of the table with all of his scientists around there. Years later, is lecturing in Dallas for MUFA and says he doesn't know anything about UFOs.
And Ed Teller, isn't he also the one who Bob Lazar claimed hired him to work at Area 51 and S4?
On crashed UFOs.
Right. But he doesn't know a thing.
Said he didn't know anything about UFOs.
And was Edward Teller involved in the program as far back as the initial beginnings of Project Red Light?
He had to be. He was there during the. He took over after the atomic bomb project was finished and we began manufacturing bombs in quantity. He was still the head of the Atomic Energy Commission, had the most secure facilities in the whole United States. So that's why the crashed UFOs were taken to Atomic Energy Commission property, where they had super secret, secure facilities. The only other place that housed a lot of this stuff that was being recovered was the White Sands Missile Test Range, which was equally secure in the mountains behind the White Sands desert.